28th. It's 4 minutes after 7, Madam Clerk. Councillors, may I please have declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda as has been circulated? Councillor Pirie, Councillor Maracas, comments or questions? All in favour? Contrary? That's carried. We have 2 planning applications tonight. Welcome to Aurora's public planning meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and obtain input regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendments and official plan amendments. No decisions will be made on any of these applications tonight. For each of the planning applications that will be considered by council tonight, the following process will occur. Town planning staff will outline the purpose of the planning applications being considered. Then the applicant will be given an opportunity to make a presentation and address issues raised in the staff report or public concerns which have already been filed. Following the presentation, the members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the proposal. And when we go through the public series once, we'll ask either the proponent or staff to comment on those concerns. Once the members of the public are finished, we'll ask members of council if they have any questions or comments on the presentation. We'll then close the public portion of the meeting and go into a debate. It should be noted the comprehensive report will be prepared and presented to a future general committee meeting, assessing the merits of the application before us and providing council with a recommendation for consideration. It's very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses of individuals having an interest in the planning applications. Therefore, if you plan speaking to council this evening, or if you wish to be notified of any further council or committee meetings concerning the applications being considered, you must complete one of the green interested party forms that Linda's holding up, and please return it to Linda before you leave this evening. Under the Planning Act, the applicant or residents have a right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the Ontario Municipal Board. But you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight, or submit any comments or concerns in writing to the town prior to council adopting an amendment. The Ontario Municipal Board may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Your name, address, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our town clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. Questions about this collection of data should be directed to the town clerk, Town of Aurora. I will now ask the Deputy Clerk to confirm that notification to the public has occurred as required by the Planning Act. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to item 1, application for zoning bylaw amendment, Canadian Tire Corporation, 14700 Yonge Street, part of lots 76 and 77, concession 1, file number ZBA-2016-05. On September 8, 2016, a notice of public planning meeting was published in the Auroran and the Aurora Banner newspapers and was given by mail to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 120 meters of the subject lands. A notice of public planning meeting sign was also posted on the subject lands. Respecting item 2, applications for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment 1754260 Ontario Limited, bracket Polo Club, 15286 and 15306 Leslie Street, part of lot 21, concession 2, file numbers OPA-2016-03 and ZBA-2016-07. On September 8, 2016, a notice of public planning was published in the Auroran and the Aurora Banner newspapers and given by mail to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 120 meters of the subject lands. A notice of public planning meeting was also placed on the subject lands. Public meeting notification has been given for each item as provided for in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will now ask the Director of Planning and Building Services to begin with the presentations. Mr. Ramuno.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As is our practice, our planners will provide a brief overview of the applications this evening. So Marty Rocos will do item number 1. We've got Lawrence Cook for item number 2, and I see the applicants and their consultants are here this evening as well. Marty.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This application is for a zoning bylaw amendment for 14700 Yonge Street. That's the empty Canadian Tire on Yonge Street right now. It's file number ZBA-2016-05. The applicant is proposing to amend the zoning bylaw to expand the range of permitted uses on the site Basically, the zoning right now that's on the site is very specific, and anything other than a Canadian Tire or that type of store is not permitted right now. So they're looking to expand the uses that are permitted, as well as have some site-specific zoning provisions in, respecting the lot coverage, drive-throughs, patios, and the front yard setback and parking requirements. The only physical changes being proposed at this time are 2 new loading spaces at the south end of the building, and I'll show that in more detail on the site plan on another slide. The property is located on the west side of Yonge Street, and it's outlined in red. You can see the surrounding land uses. There are residential townhomes to the south and part of the southern frontage, and to the west of the property. To the east is Yonge Street and the War Memorial Peace Park, and on the other frontages are commercial properties. This application is being reviewed not only by town policy, but by provincial and regional policy as well. I'll just quickly run through them, including the provincial policy statement, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan, Lake Simcoe Region Protection Plan, and the York Region Official Plan, as well as the town's official plan and zoning bylaw. The designation of the property in the town's official plan, it has 2 designations within it. They're both within the Aurora Promenade. About a third of the property on the western end of the property is designated Promenade General, and the rest of the property is designated Promenade Focus Area. And the promenade policies are basically intended for lands within the promenade to be redeveloped and for the area to be transformed into a pedestrian-focused, mixed-use type of neighborhood. Infill development would consist of mid-rise buildings with a mix of residential, commercial type of buildings, oriented toward Yonge Street and around the War Memorial Peace Park, and with an appropriate transition to surrounding residential, which you can see in the purple cross-hatching on this plan. Now, none of that is actually being proposed with this application. That's what this application is basically just expanding the number of uses that are being permitted, as well as some site-specific. Now, what I was just talking about is all in this slide. I won't repeat it, but I will say that the Promenade Focus Area designation, which is the eastern part of the property, it does have some policies that recognize the fact that it is kind of a gateway location from the south, and properties that are adjacent to the Peace Park, so it has more exceptional opportunities is the way it's worded in the official plan for infill development. To get into the uses that are permitted, in the official plan, these are permitted now with the Promenade General and Promenade Focus designations. Both have the same permitted uses, including multiple unit buildings, townhouses, apartment buildings, commercial uses including retail stores, restaurants, and personal services, hotels, offices, restaurants, data processing, institutional uses, cultural and entertainment and recreation uses, conference centers, and parks and urban squares. To get into the zoning, it's a shopping center commercial, exception 15 zone. And as I mentioned before, it is a very specific zone that was basically instituted when the Canadian Tire was built. And to get into what the zoning actually permits, and you'll see what I mean, is where it shows the permitted uses, it permits a retail store selling home products, automotive supply, and sports and leisure products, as well as ancillary uses, including automotive servicing and repair, garden center, food services, warehousing, and office space. And those are the things that the owner has proposed to change. This is the site as it's proposed. Almost the whole thing is what's there now. The only changes that are proposed, physical changes to the site, are those 2 loading bays on the south end of the building. You can see the shaded part of the building is where the new loading bays are proposed. And it would be room for 2 trucks. And the bay itself, the loading bays itself, would be a building that would be between the trucks and the residential area to the west. So now we get into kind of the nitty-gritty of what is actually being proposed. The existing uses that are permitted, that's what I just described, the retail store, the Canadian Tire type of store, is under existing, and what is proposed is that list of uses on the right of that. So basically what they've done is taken the regular shopping center zone and taken those uses, and almost all of those are in this list that we see here. What they've taken out is automotive-oriented uses, which are not permitted in the promenade. Other changes included reducing the front yard setback from 110 meters, which is the setback to the Canadian Tire from the street, and making that 6 meters. The lot coverage, the proposal is to not have a maximum lot coverage. Right now it's 35%. For parking, the parking requirement that's on the site right now, it depends on what the use is. It's a different rate for different uses. So 6 spaces per 100 square meters for retail and food services, 1 space per 90 square meters of warehouse gross floor area. They're taking that and making a flat rate of 3.5 parking spaces per 100 square meters of gross floor area. Other things they want to do is have stacking spaces, stacking for drive-throughs, a minimum of 10 cars in a drive-through, where right now there's no definition for that in the zoning bylaw. They want to have patios in the side yards, which would mean that the patios could encroach 2 meters into the required side yards on the north or the south of the building, wherever patios may be put in the future. And they also are included a definition of the drive-through restaurants. We've had a few preliminary comments, including official plan policies for drive-throughs. Drive-throughs are permitted in the official plan, but there are design policies around them, and so basically they have to be designed in a way that don't take away from what the vision of the promenade policies are. They also have drive-throughs, loading spaces requirements. It's been noted by our building department that the loading spaces are complying right now with, or what they're proposing does comply with the loading spaces, the requirements of the zoning bylaw, so that it may not be required what they propose there for zoning. And as well as the drive-through, we're looking at whether that's required as well. I've talked to a couple people from the surrounding neighborhood about their comments and questions. Mostly I've got questions about what the proposal is. I did get one comment about not wanting food-related uses, and it's too early now to really have a response to public comments or have any recommendations, but it is worth noting that the official plan does allow for supermarkets and restaurants and those types of uses. A detailed report will come to a future general committee meeting. The conclusions are noted, and that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Marty. And the consultant for the proponent?
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Daw, council members, planning staff. My name is Diana Mercier. I'm from Hunter & Associates, planning consultant, and I'm here representing Canadian Tire. I'm here tonight with Canadian Tire and Langston Lai from MMM Group, who prepared the parking study. I think Marty did a wonderful job covering everything that I was going to say. Canadian Tire, everyone I think in this room knows that the store at 14700, the dealer has now relocated successfully to Bayview Avenue, and the store seems to be thriving there and leaving the store on Yonge Street vacant. So Canadian Tire, basically what to do. So what they're proposing now is to divide the store into smaller units for retail. The options that they were looking at are, one of them was a supermarket and 2 other retailers. These are still up in the air. These potential tenants, they're not bound or anything, or there's nothing determined yet as to who the tenants will be, but these are proposed tenants. I think that what we've tried to do with the zoning bylaw is expand the uses to allow as great flexibility as possibly can for future tenants with respect to the property that is now vacant. Is there any questions?
Not yet, but we'll get back to you, I'm sure.
I think it's a very straightforward proposal, so I've already said everything that I was going to say.
Okay, thank you. We'll open it up to members of the public at this point.
Thank you.
We'll open it up to members of the public. If anybody would like to come and speak to this particular application, feel free to come down to the microphone. If you can give us your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes. There is a clock right at the front there that Linda will make sure is facing towards the podium. And I will ask you to wrap up when you get to 5 minutes, and you can always come back again.
It's on? Okay. My name's Gordon Bruin. I live at 102 Mosaics Avenue. So it's the townhouses directly behind on the west side of Canadian Tire. So I understand what you're proposing. We do have quite a few concerns. Mainly, one of it is a traffic concern, okay? Because there's already a lot of issues at the corner of Mosaics and where the no frills is, the stop signs there. People, go right through the stop signs, and now you're going to create more traffic going through, because that's the only physical entrance to our complex. As well as going out, it's the on the south side, and then going up the hill. So that's technically one of the only exits going out to go that way. So if you're proposing drive-throughs and all that other stuff, that now does do a big traffic congestion within our area. And then also, whose responsibility is it for, is Canadian Tire still the landlord? Is one of the questions that we want to know, as well, as far as maintenance of the property and all that, and snow plowing and snow removal and whatnot. So I don't know if there's anything, as well as, and the noise. And then from what I understand now too, is the actual physical building is staying, so I guess there'll be somewhat of minimal construction to a point. Like, they're not going to obviously demolish the building or anything, so it's just internal construction. So you know, there are residents behind this that that has to be taken in consideration as well. So. Give me 2 seconds here. Oh, yes, and hours of operation, I guess, would be another concern. Especially if you're talking about restaurants and stuff, because most restaurants or bars are open until 2 a.m. So that would be another issue concerning the residents. So. Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Remind you, sir, if you can give us your name, address, and you have 5 minutes.
Uno Jason, 67 Mosaics Avenue. Again, like previous individual, I'm right behind this proposed development. My only concern, and what I haven't been able to really get a good fix on, is that is there going to be or any future type of a program or development where they're going to be putting in some type of high-rises there? That's my concern. And I don't see anything anywhere mentioned. I understand that this is an application, but then also there's open possibilities to expand and develop into another direction. So that is my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Priscilla Galliano from 93 Mosaics Avenue. I am directly behind the old garden center of Canadian Tire. Canadian Tire the store was a great neighbor. So my fear with drive-throughs is the noise pollution, especially my backyard backing on to the property. I would hate for a 24-hour McDonald's or Tim Hortons here in the intercom nonstop all day in my backyard. So number one, noise pollution, and with the drive-through, car pollution, because it's not like you have a parking lot, you have cars are running continuously 24/7, and that's a huge concern for me for quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sol Guzman from 32 Henderson Drive. My concern is that the back of my house is facing directly what is going to be the new loading docks, and I'm concerned about the noise that that loading docks are going to create. That's really all.
Anyone else with respect to this application? Please. Don't be bashful. Again, if you give us your name, address, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Leanne DeBrew, and I live at 102 Mosaic. I have a concern right at Murray and Mosaic, what Gordon DeBrew was mentioning. Are you guys going to be thinking maybe putting lights there? Because it is a concern for me about when I'm walking in the morning trying to get my YRT bus to go transit that, you know, traffic flying by, people tend not to stop there. It is a concern. And also the driveway that comes off of Murray, since that Winners Smart Center REIT has built that whole retail, that driveway has not been paved the second time. And it's a big concern because we have traffic, people that live on Mosaic, and then we have customers that are coming in to shop at Winners, eat at Guest, State Main, that there is a dip there. So we have a concern, like who's going to maintain that road if we're having additional retailers come in, because they're going to be using Murray. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else? Then I will ask, if I may, the consultant for the proponent. Some of the issues we've heard, traffic concerns, especially at Mosaics and Murray. Long-term maintenance of the building, to ensure that it's maintained at the standards that it is now. Noise, hours of operation. The question about future potential of high-rise, I'll leave to Mr. Ramuno. I think that covers most of them. Again, there's a number of people who expressed concern with the potential traffic at Mosaics and Murray.
Well, with respect to the high-rise, there is no high-rise proposed. This. Oh, okay. Okay. With respect to traffic and future traffic, we've brought Langston. Go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. My name is Langston Lai. I'm representing the client, and I'm with MMM Group. So in terms of traffic and potential impact from drive-through, because this application is mainly related to zoning and the purpose is to incorporate or expand the number of land uses, there wasn't a traffic study done. And with more detail related to site plan, we'll be able to undertake further study to evaluate the traffic impact related to what ultimately we're proposing. So currently, we cannot comment on the traffic impact related to the site, but we'll definitely work with the city staff to move forward with the application and ensure that all the concerns are being looked at and addressed.
I understand that the drive-through concerns are, I understand that the drive-through concerns are with the residents in the rear. The building is not changing. There is no room, basically, for a drive-through in the back at all. We've been toying with different ideas as to where a potential tenant might be located. We're trying to protect for the future, so to minimize future planning applications and just go through site plan. The only spots we were thinking, if we were to put one, it would be closer to Yonge Street and to the front, not the rear, not where the residents are at all, not at all. We've done our best to configure the loading in the back, so the wall, so the loading truck goes directly from the front. There is the continuous wall in the rear to minimize any potential impact from a loading area. It should be just the same as the one further to the north. There is a loading area there. Can you put the site plan back up? There we go. So if you see the shaded area there, that is building that's there, and the trucks will be in the front of the building, and the housing will be in the, there's nothing going on in the back. We have to maintain, the zoning bylaw does continue to maintain the landscaping and the setback in the rear that currently exists. That is not changing at all. Also, with respect to the property, Canadian Tire will maintain ownership of the property, and the easement there, the roadway that's there, will be continue to be maintained by Canadian Tire as it is today. That will also be unchanged as well. Everything is status quo, basically. The only difference is that you're going to have 3 retailers in there instead of 1.
There was also concern expressed on the hours of operation.
The hours of operation? That will depend upon the tenants that come in, and it's very difficult to speak to that at this time because they don't have specific tenants as of yet. This will be something that I would assume will be discussed through building permit at the time of building permits, at the time, whatever bylaws are in place for restaurant operations. There are numerous bylaws in place for hours of operation and uses and such for restaurant operators. It's very difficult for me to speak to that because we might not even have a restaurant operator a tenant there at all. They might all be retailers. We're just trying to protect for the future so we don't have to keep coming back.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Mr. Rumuno for a couple of answers. Thank you. Mr. Rumuno, if you could comment, one, on the future potential of high-rises in the area. There was, again, maybe perhaps talk to the noise from the town's perspective, if you would, please. And I think concerns, well, traffic, because that was on Murray, certainly would be, Murray Mosaics would be a town issue. And the potential of drive-through, if you could speak to those 4 items, please.
Certainly. With respect to the, as Marty mentioned, the official plan designation for the Canadian Tire site is now Aurora Promenade, and that plan was put in place back in 2010, approved by council, and it was our vision for the Yonge Street corridor, for it to redevelop over time, and essentially what that means is the official plan actually would permit 5- and 7-story apartment buildings on that site. It would be subject to a rezoning application and detailed plans. The current, owner, Canadian Tire Corporate, they don't have immediate plans to redevelop the site, as we've heard. They're before us this evening strictly to add additional commercial uses here, but the lands are designated for mixed uses, apartments up to 5 stories and adjacent to the existing Mosaic townhomes, and transitioning up to 7 closer to Yonge Street. With respect to traffic and noise, they're not required to submit a traffic study because the lands are already zoned for shopping center commercial uses, but we obviously hear about the concerns over a potential drive-through use, so that's something that we're going to take a look at. Again, as they've mentioned, they don't have any detailed plans with respect to where the drive-through would go. It would likely be a standalone new building closer to Yonge Street, but we'll take a look at that moving forward. With respect to noise, again, it is a commercial site currently. We do have a noise bylaw that would control hours of operation, but also if there is a use or a tenant in there that is where they're exceeding our noise levels as per our municipal bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Rumino. I'll go back to the public. If there's anyone who has any further comments, you're welcome to come up again. Again, if I could ask you to give us your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Absolutely. So my name is Evelyn Penninkoff, and I'm at 46 Mosaics Avenue in Aurora. So as I understand it, the property that we're talking about, including our townhomes, was part of Sterling Drug back in the day. And as I understand, there was some issue around the contamination or potential contamination of the land. And so I'm concerned, living so close, if we're going to dig up the parking lot to put in, drive-throughs or, new buildings in that area, the potential health hazard to the residents that are living so close to that area, right? With the wind and, soil will just move around. So very concerned about that. Thank you.
Any other comments at this point from the public? Mr. Rumino, I'll just go right to you with respect to a potential for contamination. What would be the process the town would follow on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's something that we'll have to look into. I'm not aware of the history on the site. I'm aware of the former user. We can definitely speak to the owner to see whether when the last environmental site assessment was conducted on the property, but something that we can report back on.
Once again, I'll go to members of the public, see if there's any further comments or questions. It will be coming back to council again, so this is, just want you to be rest assured that there is no decision, as I said, being made on this project tonight. If there's no further comments from the public on this particular application, I'm now going to go to council, just if they have questions on the, to the proponent. Okay, so I've got Councilor Maracas, Councilor Perry, Councilor Kim. Is this going to be for the proponent?
Yes.
So if the consultant can come up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just got one question, actually 2 questions through you to the proponent. Has your client given any consideration to providing a buffer some landscaping features possibly between the residents on Mosaic and the property itself?
There's already a landscaping buffer there, but if need be, we can enhance it
Okay,
at the back. Yeah, because we still have to go through site plan exemption. There is
Okay.
another planning application that we have to follow
okay.
for the bump out and such, and it's called site plan exemption. So technically, we're not off the hook at all. There's still a whole other process that we need to go through, and during that time, these matters would be addressed.
Okay,
Oh,
and then
definitely.
through you to the proponent, you mentioned that it's, the applications, basically the building is staying status quo, nothing's really changing other than there's gonna be 3 units instead of 1 now. So I'm just curious to why then ask for an amendment to change the lot coverage from 35% maximum to no max? If-
That was in discussion with some of the staff, and because, just to allow the opportunity in the future perhaps to have other pads closer to Yonge Street. If you look to the neighboring property, the C416, you can see how there's a bank and such closer to Yonge Street. Perhaps, they don't know right now. We're just trying to provide the opportunity for future tenants, if they're interested in locating a pad in the front, if space allows and parking allows and so on. Again, we have to go through site plan and such to do that. And we also have to bear in mind too, I mean, the site does have its natural constraints as well. I mean, you know, it's in a bit of a bowl, and it's that ski slope that comes down. So there is, you know, plenty of opportunity for landscaping to shield off the stores or any other buildings and enhance the front, but there's plenty of trees there right now. But again, it does have its constraints, and if they can manage to fit another pad on there, I think, and also the OPE policies lend themselves to that too, because it does talk about locating buildings closer to Yonge Street. So it does fit the idea, but again, they're just ideas because there is no tenant right now.
Thank you. I'll talk more about when we, but I do have some concerns in regards to that, going to no max.
Pardon me, Councillor Spirit Kiminable.
Sorry, just to confirm, are you guys seeking no max? Because the table that's provided by staff says that there's a 35% lot coverage maximum that's going to be in effect with the new zoning. So is there,
That was, again, we were discussing what to do, and so, again, this was what we, at the time, we thought, well, and this was, again, I collaborated with staff in great detail, and we were on the phone a lot, and this is what we came up with temporarily, like a holding place, and perhaps we could, I know I talked to Marty again about it today, and he said, we're going to have to finesse that. I said, okay. I mean, we're trying to adjust it such that to give us, again, the flexibility, but the OP also has lot coverage, maximums. So I said, there is no concern there. I'm sure we can work something out.
so the reason this is my confusion, because in the document we have in front of us, the report says that you are continuing to seek a maximum of 35% coverage, and here, in what we see in front of us, it says no coverage.
Well,
I mean, no maximum. So,
Yeah, I received comments back from staff, and then they asked me to, and I was asked to revise the bylaw. The zoning examiner asked me to revise the bylaw for certain items, and also Marty wanted us to, in discussions with him, we were asked to remove the automotive-related uses, like because the C4 zone, the parent bylaw allows for gas bar for automotive service.
I'm strictly just talking about lot coverage. I'll leave that for staff
Oh, okay.
later on.
Sorry, and I took that out, and then we were looking at this together, and then we thought, okay, why don't we give us some flexibility on the lot coverage, and that's how it came about. That's what I'm
Okay.
trying to say.
Thank you.
So,
And then I guess for the benefit of the residents, I just want to make sure it's clear to everyone. What we're doing here tonight is looking at the uses that are allowed for what's currently on the site, and currently on site, the use is very much a Canadian Tire.
Exactly.
And we're here tonight to look at the type of uses that we're going to be allowing moving forward, so that more types of businesses other than just Canadian Tire. I think it'll be important for Mr. Ramuno in a little bit to explain the process so that everybody's on the same page, because I think some residents are thinking that if we, start moving forward on the uses, everything's going to be moving forward, and there is a site plan where things are going to be, which is the next step of the process.
Exactly.
So I just want to confirm with you that really the application is just going from the current Canadian Tire use
Yeah, it's
to
just
the full list of
ripping it
uses
off.
that were
Yeah.
explained before.
yeah, we're just ripping it off, because if you look at the C4, it permits a range of uses that would provide opportunity for the property to be tenanted properly.
All right.
And used.
Thank you very much.
I've got Councillor Kim, Councillor Abel, Councillor Humphries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the proponent. I'm just curious about the Canadian Tire left that location because they felt that there was another location that was more optimal than the Yonge Street location. Can you share with us in terms of the thought process in putting other retail businesses when the original retail did not succeed or did not reach its optimal goals?
This is Emily from Canadian Tire. She can.
Hi, I'm Emily Chow from Canadian Tire Real Estate. To answer your question, Councillor, the reason why we moved was because we couldn't expand the Canadian Tire store any further on the Yonge Street site. So the Target space opened up because of Target's demise, and there we were able to increase our footprint of retail by like 20,000 square feet. So it was it was an easy move. Many of the new retailers also moved to Bayview, so you kind of got to move with the trend. But the main reason was because it was a larger space, and our site was constrained because of the easement to the residents in the back, so we just had to move.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And through you, could I ask, the loading dock for Canadian Tire, or when it was operational, where was that?
That was on the north side. If you can put it up on the north side.
So you're moving it from the north side?
No, we're keeping the one there, and we're adding an additional one to service the stores to the south side, or a
I see.
potential store. So it's just a small little loading dock to the side. So the one on one side will be maintained, and then there's another one to the south, which also meets the bylaw requirements for
So
loading.
the one to the north side, the one that always was there,
Right.
was where, for us that are familiar with Canadian Tire, that's where the service bays were for the automotive.
Yeah.
That's going to stay there because it'll serve the north end, because you're going to split it up, and to potentially have another tenant, you'll have to provide a loading bay, so you're going to create that. And that's
Right.
where the garden center is now.
Exactly. That's where the garden center will be removed, and there's a loading bay there now. There's 2 additional spaces.
So
It's behind you if you look.
So the concern was noise, and I think that a lot of retailers will bring in during evening hours or in the morning hours their trucks to unload when there's no retail activity going on. So I can see that as being a concern. So there is some buffering in place because it's up a hill, and you say there are trees there?
Yes, there's trees along there, and there is some landscaping in the back. If we need to, these are site plan matters. We still have to go through site plan for the loading area. the noise attenuation, that will be dealt with at that time as well, from what I understand from planning as well. So right now we're trying to get the footprint nailed down and the uses basically for the zoning bylaw application. And right now, the only change that we're proposing for the site is the additional loading areas to service the stores, potential store to the south.
Well, my comment is that if those loading bays are there, that if heavy trucks are moving in, say between midnight and 4 in the morning, that might be disruptive to the sleep patterns of the people immediately south on Henderson and immediately behind Mosaic. So I'm wondering what sort of mitigating barriers you might create in addition to what is already there. So that's just my comment.
Okay.
I have Councillor Humphries and then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for presenting tonight. Canadian Tire is a good neighbor. We always enjoyed the store at the south end and understand the growth, so love the new store too, and I miss the south end store personally. But it's, I appreciate you coming forward tonight. I think you heard some of the residents, again, it's just preliminary, and there'll be a site plan. In terms of what Councillor Deputy Mayor Abel was mentioning, was that just the sound. I understand you have to do this in terms of trying to please the division of potential uses for retail there. Just keep in mind the noise factor for, yes. I know we'll work together and make it clear, because we don't want, residents have loved that environment for so long. Introducing some additional noise or disruption, food smells if it's a drive-through, it's something that does change the area. So appreciate you hearing that, and hopefully Canadian Tire takes that into account. And my question is, so it was asked earlier, is Canadian Tire going to maintain the landlord ownership of this property?
Yes.
And maintenance?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
That's good to know.
They will continue to own the property.
That's good. So that actually makes me feel a lot better in terms of understanding the history of the site and moving forward. And there was a comment made, and I'm not sure if this is appropriate, Mr. Mayor, but the dip in the driveway that I did hear, I do notice that in that area. Will you be looking at the entire, it's not their property, well, as tenants, do you look at the entire space or just the footprint of Canadian Tire? It's a question because I don't know who owns the entire footprint of the site. Oh, what, maybe staff can? Okay, my apologies.
It's okay.
My apologies. It looks like it's a staff question. Sorry to mix that up.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you. The site plan before us shows that you're going to partition the space to accommodate up to 3 tenants. I completely understand that nothing's confirmed. You're probably having ongoing discussions with multiple retailers and so forth, but you may or may not change this depending on who's willing to come on board. Is there a minimum unit size that you're looking at? What I'm trying to avoid is a situation where you have a number of 1,200 or 1,800 square foot units within this space, and then we have multiple tenants. So is there a minimum size that you're looking for?
Not at this time, no.
Okay.
Councillors, any other comments for the proponent, Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. And I know that you can't tell us right now, but among the tenants that you're hoping to attract, there could be a restaurant with a patio, a drive-through, and a grocery store.
Yes.
Thank you.
If that's it for comments from council, I thank you very much. We'll now close the public portion of the meeting. Linda, if you could put the motion up on the screen. Thank you. If someone would move that, please, so we can discuss it. Councillor Humphries, Councillor Kim. So to the motion on the screen, the proposal, Councillor Peary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Mr. Muno, for the benefit of everybody in the audience. Could you explain the process of what happens so that everybody's aware and we're all on the same page?
Mr. Muno, please.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the applicants are before us this evening with a zoning amendment application, as we've heard, to add the similar commercial shopping center uses that exist within the plazas to the north, the Winners Complex and the No Frills Complex. Currently, the site is zoned strictly for the Canadian Tire's use, and so they're expanding those uses. The next step is, we're going to report back to council, depending on the direction this evening, and come back with a comprehensive report. I just want to, clarify for, council, more so for the residents in the audience. Any additional uses that are being requested, if they are approved moving forward, as we've heard, those uses or tenants will take place within the existing Canadian Tire store. What they're also asking for is that we've heard sort of a minor site plan application just to deal with any additional landscaping that we may require, and specifically the loading docks. If they are approved and added along that southern location, one of our requirements would be, and it doesn't really show up on the drawing, is that an acoustical noise wall also be added to mitigate against noise, and to be similar to a wall that currently exists around the perimeter of the Canadian Tire store. The one last thing is any future buildings or standalone pads that are requested, we would require the applicant to come forward with a new site plan application that would be considered by council. And we've heard comments about, the drive-through associated with any restaurant, and that's something we'll take a look at, and that would require more detailed plans to be considered by council.
And Mr. Ramuno, if you could talk to the 35% lot coverage versus the maximum lot coverage as well, please. Through you, Mr. Mayor. My apologies on that. There's a bit of a discrepancy between what was on the chart and what's in the report before council. The current lot coverage on site based on the existing zoning is 35%, and I believe the Canadian Tire store now is about an 80,000 square foot of building, and it's close to that 35% coverage. They are asking for an increase in coverage because they're planning to add the loading space and perhaps a future pad. I can assure council and residents that we would not recommend a no maximum lot coverage. There would be a number once we see those more detailed plans, but in coming forward, if they're asking for an increased lot coverage, it may be slightly above 35%, but it won't be 100%. And because it's not in a report, what do you think this maximum lot coverage would be?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I haven't seen their, what their detailed plans are, but I think, between 40 and 50% is probably something that could work. Again, it really depends on the type of uses and the parking. They are asking for a parking reduction from 350 that they currently have to approximately 280. So it's something that we will take a look at. So I think obviously a bit more than 35% is feasible, but obviously not 100%.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Councillors Thompson, Rackus.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Mr. Ramuno touched on it briefly with regards to future construction. So the way I understood the applicant is that really with regards to the existing building, they'll partition it and have a number of tenants, but in all likelihood, from what I heard, that there won't be any drive-throughs associated with the existing building or patios. They really want to have that for any future construction. So through to Mr. Ramuno, if there is a site plan and they look to add a pad by Yonge Street for a Tim Hortons or something like that, you mentioned that it would come back to council from a site plan, but how would the residents be able to get engaged or be able to provide comments? Would it come to a public planning meeting, or would it strictly come straight to council?
Mr. Ramuno.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's a good question. They are, within this application, they are asking for a drive-through. If that eventually gets approved, obviously then the next step is they would come forward with a site plan application, and that would come in front of council. As you know, site plan applications don't require public notification, but I do have direction from council to look at that. The other option that we may consider is perhaps moving forward, not to recommend or approve a drive-through use until we actually see a formal site plan application.
which is very reasonable. My only other comment, I mean, certainly the public have expressed a number of different issues, and I know you've taken note of it. I just think within the existing Canadian Tire building, there should be a limitation to the number of partitions. I just want to try and avoid a number of small units.
Councilor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think that overall, I think we all want to see something go in there. We don't want to see the area be empty and be for lease. So, you know, moving forward, I definitely would want to see some stuff go in there. My concern is with that lot coverage, due to the fact of, as Councillor Thompson mentioned, is that it's going to be coming back if we approve that change just in a site plan application instead of public planning. So I would prefer to, whatever it is that they want to do right now, we allow for that lot coverage. So whether if that's 37, if that's 40, if that's with the loading dock, but not with the future pad. For me, I'd prefer to let's approve it with what's needed to do what they need to do right now. And if they come at future, it comes forward at public planning. Therefore, the residents get notified. They come out here. We can look at it and decide whether we actually want to allow that instead of if we approve it now. To me, it's almost a done deal because when we get to those site plan applications, you know, we all know we've made the amendments. They don't need amendments. So at the end of the day, it's very tough for us to say no for whatever they put forward. So that's my concern. As long as we can keep it that way, I'm in favor of moving forward, and as long as we look at some of those other concerns too. But if we're still looking to pursue a higher number on that lot coverage, I wouldn't be able to support this.
Any other comments from council? Councilor Gardner, did you have your hand up? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following on Councillor Marakis' comments, the other things that concern me about approval now is the parking, because we don't know what the use is going to be, and we want to make sure there's enough parking. And the other thing is I'm not sure, Mr. Rokos mentioned the front yard minimum, and I think it was from 110 meters to 6 meters. Again, I wouldn't approve that at this meeting because there's no need to. That would allow for development 6 meters from would it be the lot line, the boulevard? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe I did mention that, and it is in the table that I showed up on the presentation. The way that the zoning is set up right now is that 110 meter setback is for the main building, for what's referred to as Building A. And I believe the applicant is looking to allow flexibility to perhaps have a future pad closer to Yonge Street at some point in the future.
Thank you. I am wrong. The chart says 110 changing to 12.0 for other buildings. But I personally don't want to approve that. We don't need it for this present application. And, well, Councilor Marakis said it all. It's not appropriate to approve that now. With respect to what's going in there must, I mean, I don't know, but if it's a patio, patios are open very late in the day into the evening, so I don't know what, it's backing right onto a residential area. We've had this problem before, Mr. Muno. Are there any restrictions we can put on a patio?
Mr. Muno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, restaurants and patios are permitted in the C4 zone to the north, properties to the north. So the only restriction, if they are permitted, you know, we do have our bylaws with respect to hours of operation and our noise bylaw with respect to excessive noise that may come from a particular use.
Councilor?
And there would also be some barriers that hopefully would protect against the noise. Do we, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Maroney, do we mandate that as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, difficult to mitigate noise, you know, with a physical barrier for a restaurant or a patio. The one thing with respect to the loading dock, we typically require those type of noise walls to buffer the loading space and adjacent uses.
Councilor?
Well, it just concerns me because the potential is that there could be patios directly abutting neighborhood properties. And of course, it was mentioned about the contamination with respect to Sterling Drugs. That is something that I have heard as well. And did you check that out? Do we check that out, or the proponent?
Mr. Muno?
Through Mr. Mayor, we'll investigate the.
The town will do it. Thank you.
Councilor Abel.
I appreciate the comments. As far as patios go, I know we had a very similar sort of last term for Symposium Cafe, and it's turned out quite reasonable. And I can only see a patio being on the front side of the building. It couldn't be at the back. It couldn't be at the north or the south ends because they both got loading docks. So it would just be sort of in front, much like State and Main. And they've proven to be quite contained and not with unruly or something. So I'm really not concerned. I am concerned that if we grant this as is, then they could easily put a drive-through close to Yonge Street, and that changes the whole demographics. And I would be very concerned. So I think if we could withhold that perhaps with comment, saying based on what we see, I don't know if that's permissible, but I would go ahead with all the other designations that they're seeking, because they have to try and attract business. They have to try and lease that space. Of course, it's good for the town. So we're moving ahead, good for the landowners. So I don't want to impede it, because there's one part of this that concerns me, but most of the other concerns have been met. So I would like to see it move forward and not allow the drive-through until they can, I don't know how it will be worded or if it's appropriate, but just saying you can do everything, and if you do have a drive-through, bring it forward so that we can bring it to the public and get a better idea where it is and what you want to do with it. Because the way it is as it stands, you could put a drive-through right at Yonge Street, and they built it, and then we've got a different dynamic. So that's my comment.
Mr. Umuno, can we preclude drive-through at this point?
To you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it's one of those uses that's been requested. Moving forward, I've heard the comments, so moving forward, I think that is something that we could not permit at this point with respect to a drive-through associated with any standalone restaurant, because we don't have any definitive plans from the applicant. So that's certainly something that we could eliminate from the requested uses.
So, Councilor Abel, would you like to make that amendment?
Mr. Mayor, I would make that amendment. Thank you very much. If that wording is, I would just look for a seconder.
Just, Madam Clerk, a comment?
The purpose of this meeting is to collect comments, and that staff will take into consideration to bring back to a general committee meeting, and then which will be ratified at a council meeting.
So, Councilor Abel, I apologize. I was somewhat jumping the gun there.
You don't have to apologize, Mr. Mayor, but thank you very much.
Just a couple of comments. The no maximum parking really doesn't make any sense, because no one could park when they go there. So I'm not sure that that's as much of an issue, although I am concerned that there's a difference between the presentation slides and what we have in our package. So I think a little more diligence in terms of making sure that doesn't happen again. Also, and Councilor Abel pointed out that there's the State and Main restaurant immediately in the plaza to the north has an outdoor patio. And I don't recall any complaints about that. So I think they can be put in successfully, although you have to be careful in Symposium, as you mentioned. Has also gone through fairly well. And the last comment I'll make is that there is already a drive-through bank in the plaza right beside it. So, Mr. Umuno, if a drive-through application was eventually to be considered, could require that it be in what would be the northeast corner of that property, which is right pretty much beside where the bank's drive-through is. If you could comment on that.
Yes, certainly, Mr. Mayor. That's something we could definitely take under consideration with respect to locating any future drive-through or restaurant. We can stipulate exactly where we would like to see it. Okay. So I think we'll have those discussions moving forward with the applicant. But I've made notes of all the comments that I've heard. So we'll incorporate those into our future report.
Thank you very much. Councillors, any other comments? Councillor Marcus, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just got quickly, we touched about the environmental aspect of it, and I'm just curious, if there was any digging, would an environmental assessment be needed?
Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the site is, environmental site assessment is really only required if you go into a more sensitive land use. The site is zoned for commercial uses, and they're only proposing to add to those commercial uses. So based on my understanding, an environmental site assessment, isn't required at this point. But I will go back and speak to the applicant to see what if any work was completed previously on site.
Okay. And sorry, and the follow-up through you, and not just speaking to the loading dock, if they decide to add the extra pad or something, they're going to have to do that digging. That wouldn't require an environmental assessment? It wouldn't trigger it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, not based on my understanding, because the site is zoned for commercial uses, it wouldn't trigger a site assessment.
But you will investigate that as you go through your process. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Humphreys?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick comment. It does recommend that we come back to a future general committee. And I know that, I think at the moment, maybe soon, we'll have different notification. But if it does come back to a GC, I'm not sure if the residents would get, they will? Okay, perfect. You'll get notified. That's all I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner?
There was also mention about the exit from that plaza, and it's got stop signs right now. That was quite a battle to get stop signs there. And when I've been around, it has worked, but I'm not always around. So if people are not stopping at the stop signs, is there anything that we can do to ensure that they are?
Well, we could ask York Region Police to step up their patrols there.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? At this point, in that case, I'll call the vote. All in favor of the motion on the screen? Contrary? That is carried. Thank you very much. This will be coming, staff will be preparing a comprehensive report. Please make sure that if you haven't already done so, to sign one of the forms. Linda, if you could hold that up again, please. Please sign that before you leave tonight. We'll make sure that you're advised of the next meeting that goes on with respect to this application. Thank you very much for coming out. And of course, you're welcome to stay for the next application. We'll just wait about a minute here for everyone to leave. Okay, Councilor Marcus, if we could start with the next application, please. Mr. Muno.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next application is the official plan zoning applications. Lawrence Cook, our planner, will provide an overview again, and I think Mr. Brad Rogers is here representing the applicant. Lawrence?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Tonight we'll be speaking on the application on 15286 and 15306 Leslie Street. The application is an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment. The purpose of the official plan amendment is to redesignate the existing designation from community commercial to medium and high density residential. The zoning application is to change the zone from rural to apartment third density exception zone. The proposed development of the apartment building is to allow for 2 6-story apartment building for a total of 300 units with 2 underground parking, 1 right-in, right-out vehicular access off Leslie Street. The location map shown on this slide here is to show where the subject lands is, approximate the northwest corner of Leslie and Wellington, just north of the existing Esso station, just south of the Salvation Army places of worship site, and immediately east of the Stronach Aurora Rec Community Center. The previous application on the site, councils looked at this OPA application on this property in 2010. Council approved the zoning bylaw subject to a site plan application. The previous owner never submitted a formal site plan application as a result of inactivity. Staff closed the zoning amendment application in 2014. Some quick details about the previous official plan amendment to get to a community commercial designation is that there is a 15-meter buffer area in the immediate back of the site. Along the westerly property line in the official plan requires development to be consistent with an approved EIS, which requires a 15-meter buffer to allow replacement of planting and other planting requirements. Other requirements regarding are just the 2B secondary plan in regards to urban design guidelines. This application will be reviewed in consistence with the provincial, regional, and municipal policies as listed. The existing official plan designation on the site is community commercial, surrounded by other commercial development, commercial designations. The proposed official plan amendment is to go to a residential designation. The area in the subject land is considered in the area 2B development. The slide here show areas in yellow are considered in the 2C area of the secondary plan. Some of the details to the official plan amendment includes the increase of density from 99 units per hectare to 167 units per hectare. There is also a proposal of increase of the overall building height from 4 stories to 6 stories. Official plan number 30 indicates that only certain locations along Wellington Street East where building heights may increase but cannot exceed 7 stories in height. The existing zoning bylaw is rural, just to reflect the former use on the subject lands. It is surrounded by other commercial uses, as well as the institutional uses. The proposed zoning amendment is to allow for the apartment building. This chart indicates some of the details of the zoning bylaw amendment. To go down the list of permitted uses, the proposed use is for 2 apartment buildings over 2 lots. These are 2 lots that got merged into one because of the language of our zoning bylaw, the applicant seeking for an amendment. The lot area, our zoning bylaw uses a formula basis to judge on what the minimum lot area is. If you're looking to propose 300 units on this site, the zoning bylaw requires you to have a lot area of 2.85 hectares. The proposed 300 units from the applicant is looking to have 1.83 hectares. Other development standards are listed in the report as is, with front yard setbacks, side yards, and exterior side yards. The lot coverage is increasing from 35% to 37%, and as well as a change in the parking ratio as listed. There is a conceptual site plan that came in with the application, as shown on the slide here. We are looking at a 2 6-story apartment for a total of 300 units, 1 right in, right out onto Leslie, as shown, with 2 levels of underground parking. Here's another conceptual perspective drawing submitted by the applicant, proposing bedrooms ranging from 1 bedroom to 3 bedroom plus den, ranging sizes of 60 square meters to 130 square meters. Please note that a formal site plan application has not been submitted at this time. We have retained some preliminary comments from our circulations. Just to highlight some of the comments that we have is that we will obtain an urban design peer reviewer to review the proposed apartment building inconsistent with the 2B and abutting 2C secondary plan. Our development engineer would like to review the calculation of the available servicing capacity. The traffic study our traffic analyst would like to expand the traffic study to include the areas of First Commerce Drive and State Farm Way. Our park services would like to speak to about, have more discussion on the amenity space provided. Of course, the LSRCA, the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority, would like to continue to review the hydrogeological study and the stormwater management on the site. And I would also like to highlight that York Region have not exempted this application from regional approval at this time. They would like to continue to look at the issue with the access onto Leslie Street. We have obtained a number of public comments on this application via written, telephone, as well as email. To go down the list, we have concerns with the proposed building height, massing along Leslie Street, the overall lot coverage. Some of the residents indicated that the official plan has not contemplated for a high-density residential development. Concerns increase in density, reduced parking standards, as well as the overall safety with regards to the increase of traffic onto the nearby intersections. Of course, there's a discussion with regards to the development proposal and how it impacts existing well water from a quantity and quality point of view. In conclusion, staff would like to continue this application and take a technical review and to go over some of the comments and to get a chance to address comments from the public and council and bring a comprehensive report to the next general committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. For the proponent, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, members of the public. My name is Stephen Wimmer. I'm the managing principal of the MBTW Group. We are acting as the urban design consultants for the applicant. The applicant is Royal Park Homes. And firstly, Lawrence, I would like to thank you for a very thorough presentation. And I was hoping today to just augment the very technical aspects of Lawrence's presentation with perhaps an overview of the project itself. I should say that joining us today in the audience is Doug Skeffington, VP of Development for Royal Park Homes. We have the planning consultant, Brad Rogers from Groundswell. We have the architect, John Romanoff. And we also have Mark Jameson of the BA Group for Transportation Questions. Again, our goal today is to provide you with an overview and fantastic. Thank you. So as was mentioned by staff, the application submitted in June of this year is for an OPA and a zoning bylaw amendment to effectively change the community commercial to the medium-high density residential, and to change the zoning from its current rural use to apartment third density exception zone. So an overview of the project, and this view we have here is looking southeast towards Leslie and Wellington Street. As stated, 2 6-story buildings. We feel that they are strategically located in the intersection or close by the intersection of Leslie and Wellington Street, 2 regional arterials. Again, it was mentioned a broad range of housing options within these buildings, from 1 bedroom ranging up to 3 plus a den units plus the sizes. And then providing a street presence along Leslie that is both complementary to the long-term vision and reflective of what's across the road today. And the adjacent uses, we can see here again from the site in the aerial photograph, we have to the immediate south the existing gas station, to the north the place of worship. Significantly, and we'll state this a few times today, the existing Stronach Aurora recreational complex to the immediate west, and to the north of that, the Stuart Burnett Park. Areas further south, we have the Magna Golf Course and employment uses. So there is a node, a development node in this area, and obviously to the east we have the Smart Center with the full range of commercial and retail. To the site plan, some specifics. The building setback is proposed to be 6 meters versus the 9. And from our perspective, in our opinion, the rationale for that really causes us to look at the overall block in its totality. So rather than a continuous street edge along Leslie, the architects through the site plan have proposed to break up and animate and provide some variety along that edge by setting the second building further back. The benefit of this, one may appear to be obvious now in the site plan, is that the parking, the visitor parking, which is shown in the interior of the plan, is not actually visible from the street edge. So what we see is the building and its building massing. Also significant here is the opportunity for direct connection through the back, either through the west end or the northwest corner of the site to the existing park and recreational complex. To the building massings, what we began to illustrate here, just for reference, are precedent images. The architectural style is envisioned to be more contemporary, more modern, in fact reflective of much of what you see being built today on the north side of Wellington, further west of the site. Again, we did speak about the diversity of housing forms or the units themselves. Of the 300 units, 150 in each of the two buildings. To have 1 bedroom, 1 bedroom plus den, 2 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms plus den, 3 plus den, so that the public or the home purchasing public have a series of options here. It's not just studio apartments, but that all areas of the home buying public in Aurora can look to these apartments as opportunities. To the actual building massing, again, we'll look at some of the details in a moment. Through the siding that we saw moments ago, the buildings are also broken up with porches and details along the street edge, as well as the roof treatment to provide some scale. From the character perspective, we feel that the building massing and the contemporary style is appropriate and begins to work quite well. One of the things I didn't mention was that we were the urban designers and planners for Wellington Lanes community here some 20 years ago. And it took a great number of years for the mid-rise buildings along John Westway to be constructed. So I'm very pleased to say that today it's become a complete community. Those buildings are, as you well know, 5 and 6 stories in height. They have 2-meter and 3-meter setbacks, and to that end, it gives us some context. These buildings, although they may be larger, have smaller street frontages in the way the site plan has been configured. And I apologize for the small text here, but what this diagram begins to illustrate is the massing from Leslie. So we have taken a lead from the Wellington Street East Corridor Area 2B Urban Design Guidelines that has an angular plane requirement. And basically what it states is that the building, as it gets taller, needs to set back further. And the architect has very effectively done this. And in this instance, the angular plane of 60 degrees has been applied, so we are in fact in compliance with that guideline. The height, and I know that it was one of the questions that had been asked, given the site and its context, and this is a fairly general configuration, but it's based on the topographic information we have. So on the right side of the screen, we have the existing Aurora Smart Centers and the building height in the top of the hill, the relative location of Leslie, and the proposed development, so that effectively from Leslie Street, it is more like a 5-story building because it in fact steps down. So with this representation, and it's accurate to the point of this discussion, that the building height is actually less than what you have across the road. To the conceptual site plan, and I think in fairness to the process we're going through today, we simply have a lot of material that's been generated by a lot of learned consultants and a development team that has worked very cooperatively towards a site plan approval, which is not the subject for today's discussion. But what we can use is this material to begin to inform the decisions you're making today about the OPA and the rezoning. So this is, in fact, the conceptual landscape site plan prepared by Strybos, and begins to highlight one of the items I pointed out before, and that is at the very top left-hand side, there is an arrow, and that arrow represents a potential linkage to the rec center and the park to the north. So as an urban designer, with a planning interest, here we have 300 residents that are within walking distance of a major recreational facility within the community. They don't have to drive there. In fact, they don't have to walk more than 2 minutes. And from an urban design perspective, Mara, I know we're laughing. We talk about the 5-minute walk. Well, this is a 2-minute stroll. So it is very appropriate to consider that. Other comments included provision of a tot lot. And again, these are some of the imageries that our landscape architect has provided us, yet to be designed, but it is envisioned that the open spaces between these buildings and beside these buildings would be landscaped to a high level to accommodate parking or tot lots, possible tenant garden plots, and seating areas and shade areas for the comfort of the residents. So I wanted to provide sort of a summary, hopefully to address some of the concerns and questions that have been raised. As recently as this morning, we received, and I believe the town received at the same time, the comments from the region. So in the region's comments, they point out that the York Regional Official Plan Policy, and for those who are keeping count, 5.3.1, requires that a minimum of 40% of all residential development occurs within the built-up area as per the province's growth plan for the GTA. They go on to say that while this site is not identified as an intensification area, staff generally supports intensification at this location, provided that the proposed development is adequately serviced and supported by the proper infrastructure, including regional street network. So we're moving our way through this process, and yes, those questions with regard to servicing will be answered. They go on to say that given that the site is close to highways, specifically the 404, and on a arterial road, that this is an ideal location for intensification. To the site again, and we've seen this a few times now, but with regard to the compatibility of the land use, often the concerns about height are specifically related to the potential overview of existing residential that's at a lower density. These buildings, granted the 6 stories in height, are nowhere close to proposed future development, and that the existing residences that are on Wellington Street, it's my understanding, are going through an application to be converted to commercial. So what we have around the site is a place of worship to the north, to the northwest, a park to the immediate west, the Stronach Aurora rec facility, to the immediate south, the gas station, and to the zone between, which is sort of taupey yellow in the diagram, that is ultimately considered to be future commercial. And of course, to the east of Leslie, we have the existing Aurora Smart Center. So looking at the compatible uses that are, or the uses that are existing around the site, we find that and feel strongly that a medium high-density designation residential is in fact appropriate. Again, you've seen this before, so just to restate that with regard to the height relationships, the 4 to 6 stories, the relativeness to the Aurora Smart Centers, we feel that this is an appropriate solution. To the site plan, again, the key, the building massing, the internalizing of the surface parking for visitors. And actually one of the keys with regard to both the density is that this proposal envisions 100% of the tenant parking underground. And as you know, from the developments very north or immediately north of here, it's very expensive to do underground parking. So the metrics and such are such that we look for that critical mass of units to do so. Also means the buildings will get slightly larger, and as you know, illustrated very clearly in the previous application this evening, even at 35% coverage, the remaining 65% was parking. Whereas here, the 37% coverage, a mere 2% over, the vast majority of the land left remaining is landscaping or trees to be preserved. Lastly, we are working our way through a process, as your chief planner will describe, and we recognize that future work is required, and that today, review of additional York Regional comments are being undertaken, that questions regarding servicing are being addressed. As mentioned by Lawrence, the request for an expanded traffic study is being considered, and that currently the vegetation management plan is underway. So these are tasks that are today being addressed. So with that, I conclude my presentation, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, sir. Excuse me, I'll now open it up to members of the public who might have some comments. I invite you to come to the microphone. If you could give us your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Daw, members of council, members of staff, and interested parties. My name is Eric Liversidge, and I live at 1426 Wellington Street East. And before I start, I would like to clear up a statement that was made by the proponent right away. They seem to be forgetting about us. We border the proponent's property on our northern side by 7.26 meters. We are zoned rural residential. I'm prefacing my comments here by the history of having lived in this same location for 53 years. So when he states that everything surrounding this is commercial, I'm sorry, we are not commercial. Lawrence has very adeptly addressed some of my concerns in planner's jargon, but I'd like, if you would, please indulge me while I give it to you in the layman's jargon. My wife and I are the owners of property at 1426 and 1414 Wellington Street East, and have our residence on the property at 1426 Wellington Street East. The subject lands being proposed for development border our north property line for a distance of 7.26 meters. Having reviewed the preliminary site plan, we would like to put forth the following concerns and suggestions for your consideration. OPA 30 of the town's official plan has designated the subject lands to be community commercial. High density, or medium density as the proponent prefers to call it, residential is not one of the land uses permitted under the community commercial designation, and as such is in contravention of the town's official plan. The proposed density on the subject lands exceeds the established levels for development of this type in Aurora. The site plan shows there's a shortfall of 75 parking spaces from what is requirement for a development, or required, I should say, for a development of this size. And as Lawrence addressed, we have a major concern as to the impact a development of this size, being in close proximity to our property, will have on our well. The subject lands are in a natural runoff area with water draining through the Stronach Aurora Recreation Complex parking lot. In the dry season, this is contained in underground drainage. In the spring, this water runs right over the parking lot. So there is a drainage issue. Should this site plan be allowed to go ahead, the access and egress from the subject lands, being as close as it is to a busy intersection, will cause major congestion, and pose a significant safety risk. This will be further aggravated with the additional traffic once all the building on the C2 lands is completed and the Leslie Street modernization project is finished. Access to this development has been restricted to right in, right out. If we assume that a large number of residents living in this proposed development would commute to locations to our south, returning to their residence at night will necessitate turning off 404 onto Wellington Street, then making a right-hand turn onto First Commerce Drive, a left-hand turn onto State Farm Way, another left onto Leslie Street, before reaching the condo complex. We suggest to you that a large number of people will choose the more direct route of turning north on Leslie Street, making a U-turn around the existing median to access the proposed development. This creates a major safety issue and a hazardous situation for all. And if I can expand on that, right now, anyone coming south on Leslie Street wanting to turn west on Wellington, if they were to turn on their signal light at an appropriate time to give any following traffic notification of what they're doing, and someone was sitting in that driveway from the Esso station coming out onto Leslie, they cut right out in front of you because they assume you're turning into the Esso station in Leslie. Had it happened to me several times. And if I could ask that the preliminary site plan be put up for me, please. And while that's being put up, we do have a concern about tree conservation and what plans are in place for tree conservation. Okay, if you're to look at that plan, it shows an access to the shopping center directly opposite the access and egress from this property. This access to the shopping center does not exist and is highly unlikely one would ever be put there because of the significant grade separation. Right now, where that access is, there is 70 feet of vertical fill supporting Golf Town and Best Buy.
Mr. Libet, I'm just going to break in for a second. Normally, we allow 5 minutes, but I don't believe there's any other members of the public here to speak to this issue tonight, so I will let you carry on for another 5.
Thank you, I appreciate that. It won't take much longer. So again, I'm suggesting to you that as that does not exist, and I can't see how it would ever go there, because I think anyone familiar with that area knows 70 feet straight up, Golf Town and Best Buy. These are the concerns that we have from an initial review of the development and site plan. We reserve the right to voice any other concerns should this project move on in the development process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. And I know there's a couple of other members of the public here. Does anybody else wish to speak to this particular application? Okay. I'll ask the proponent to come up and if you could address some of those issues, which is potential impact, I should say, on the well, drainage from the property, the right in, right out. I think that's definitely something that needs to be addressed, and I believe the last point was tree preservation.
Correct. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, and parking, I'm sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, many of the points, we too have received the residents' summary of concerns and look to be able to address those in due course. If I may. So the matter of the tree preservation or the vegetation management plan, that is being addressed today. I spoke with the planner, and that work is being surveyed and such, and that will be available for staff's review in short order. The matters of servicing and or site drainage is also part of the engineering works, and I'm not able to speak to that in any detail, but I am assured that the existing grading condition that causes the water to flow in the direction that it does today is actually going to be solved as part of this site plan redevelopment. And lastly, that the matters of traffic, which also include the concern about parking, will be addressed through this expanded traffic study. So I'm sorry I can't provide you with definitive answers about the details, but it is work in progress. With regard to the concerns about density and or heights of building or numbers of units, we continue to be of the vision and of the opinion that the numbers, whether it's 35 to 37%, or the setback of 6 to 9, or whether it's the building height of 4 to 6, that each site in due course requires its full review to be considered of its surrounding context. And yes, and I apologize for implying that it isn't a residential today. It is. But I do believe in the fullness of time, even your own official plan looks for a higher use along Wellington Street. So perhaps if there's further more detailed questions requiring the consultants to provide some comments, I just look over my shoulder to see if anyone can provide that. I think I'd like to ask Mark Jameson to step up. He is the traffic consultant from the BA group, and perhaps he can answer some questions. Thank you, Mark.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my name is Mark Jameson. I'm a transportation consultant with BA Group. We've done the transportation study that has been submitted with the application. As Stephen noted, that we are going to be addressing several of these comments through the resubmission that will be made to the town. Both the region and the town town staff have asked that we address some of the questions regarding how traffic gets to the site. I would just briefly want to note that the issue of the access and the right in, right out is partially related to the fact that Leslie Street is a regional road. York Region does have requirements and restrictions on how access can be provided. There is a place of worship immediately to the north of the site that has a driveway that was recently constructed that really sort of pens in essentially where driveways can be provided for this particular site. So the actual right in, right out nature is one of the reasons it is right in, right out is because that is felt both by the region to be safer than providing the ability to turn left into the site there. So with respect to the fact that that means people coming from the south will have to go around the block a little bit, that's one of the reasons we are going to be analyzing the impact at some of the intersections to the east. And so that will be addressed. Two other things that were pointed out, with respect to the driveway across the street that was noted as being commercial, that's actually a driveway to the transformer station. It's not a commercial driveway, it's an existing sort of service access. So I don't believe that we were intending to imply that was a commercial driveway. And lastly, with respect to parking, we are proposing a rate of 1.25 spaces per unit, which is a rate that is certainly in keeping with some of the lower rates that are proposed in the promenade area in the town's official plan and for other exception zones for RA3. I think generally the auto ownership nature of these types of site is, even in York Region, is decreasing, and that's one of the reasons our client is seeking to develop that. But that will be reviewed in future in further detail with town staff.
Thank you. Mr. Ramuno, do you have any comments on some of those issues? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Rogers.
Apologies. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the public. I just wanted to clarify one comment that our neighbor made with respect to the concept plan and the location of the right-in, right-out, he indicated that there was a commercial access across the street on the east side. It's actually a transformer station access, and it's not a commercial access to Best Buy or Golf Town. So I just wanted to clarify that, both for council and for our neighbor. Thank you.
Mr. Raimondo, do you have any comments?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I mean, at this point, we have been working with the region and the applicant, so we have requested some additional information for us to evaluate based on, and similar to what the last speaker had mentioned, updated traffic study is something the region requested, servicing analysis, a vegetation plan, and again, we don't have a formal site plan application, but we do have a conceptual site plan, and we've seen some renderings and some conceptual landscape plans that the applicant has put up on the screen this evening. So there are still a number of things that we need to take under consideration in our review as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Raimondo. Mr. Liversdale, do you have any? Excuse me. Do you have any other comments you'd like to make at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things that I neglected to address, I guess, was grade separation between their property and our property. I noticed in one of their slides here, they had a step down coming into the arena parking lot. I'm wondering how that will impact our property at that same back corner, because we are adjacent to the arena parking lot. Second thing, I guess, with all due respect, the proposed site plan did not show that access being to a transformer station. It showed that access being to a shopping center. So that was the reason for my comments. And I guess from input which I received this weekend at the opening of the Northridge Community Center, Salvation Army Church, they are already having an issue with people coming into their parking lot and using it as a way to turn around and go in the opposite direction. And also with the right-in, right-out access, what if somebody there wants to go north on Leslie Street? Where do they go? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wimmer, do you have any further comments? Yeah.
I'm sorry, if I could just add one more thing. My coach here is telling me that they are asking for an access into the arena parking lot. Would one then not surmise that they are going to end up using the Stronach Aurora Rec Complex as part of their parking to alleviate the parking congestion they're going to have by not providing enough parking spaces? That parking is also already going to have to accommodate the new tennis center that is going in at the Stronach Aurora Rec Complex. So for them to think that they can use that parking, I'll leave that in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wimmer, do you have any final comments?
Only in response to the last comment that was made, and that is there had been some discussion about addressing what might be some of the transportation challenges with looking at access not through the rec facility, but a future commercial to the south. So there's no intention at all on sharing parking requirements with the existing rec facility. As Mark had pointed out, the request, and it's a reasonable request to make, is to the 1.25 parking spaces per unit, which is what Town Council has applied to other sites. We're on a transit corridor. We are on Wellington Street and Leslie, and it's reasonable to assert that. So there's no proposal to envision that a parking deficit or a potential parking deficit on this property will be alleviated by using the community's facility.
Thank you, sir. I will close the public portion of the meeting, and I will ask council if they have any comments for the proponent. Council, well, I've got Councillor Thompson, Abel, Gartner. Mr. Wimmer.
Can you confirm if the visitor parking is just what we see on the diagram in front of us, which looks to be at a maximum 16 spaces?
There's 16 on surface, but there will be additional spaces below grade.
Can you provide a number?
Don't know what that number would be. In fact, at the point of an OPA, we don't really need a site plan, but what we have done, as I mentioned, Councillor, is advance the concepts to this point. Once the parking ratios are crystallized, we'd be able to confirm exactly where the visitor parking would exist.
Because although there may not be an intent to use the recreational facility, if there isn't sufficient visitor parking, there's no place to park on Leslie, there's no place to park on Wellington. And
Correct.
common sense would dictate that that's where everybody would go to park, is in the SARC. And so my concern is, just based on what I see, there's not sufficient visitor parking for 300 units. So.
Correct. I do believe it's around 16 surface parking spaces are provided. Again, gone through great expense to create an underground parking structure of 2 levels. And I do believe that a portion of that is envisioned to be visitor parking. I can't answer the question of exactly whether there's another 20 or 30 or 200 visitor parking spaces.
Councillor Abel.
Along the same lines as the parking, I'll save my comments, but the parking is 1.25. Is that what we have in the report? So that means for each unit, if we had 300 units, we're looking at 75 additional parking. So it'd be 375 parking spots.
It would, correct.
And that would include the visiting parking.
That would include, I'm sorry?
Visitors parking.
Correct.
So the transit corridor has not been developed here in Aurora. You may probably know that. So the reliability is going to be questionable until time dictates. Now, the province has addressed the need to have entry-level price points for housing.
Affordability.
We use the word affordability, but immediately people associate that with maybe social assisted. So what it is I always say, it's for like my children maybe, or for seniors that are retiring or downsizing that will pay, but need an entry level. It's not a high-end condo unit. So is there any plans to earmark what that is?
Actually, Councillor, I thank you for allowing me to expand on that. The project does envision a full range of unit sizes, from about 750 square foot single bedroom studio-like apartments for the single young adult, maybe the student and so forth, or perhaps a single senior. And then having the full range of single bedroom with a den, 2-bedroom, 2-bedroom with a den, 3, so forth and so on. By the time you get to the largest unit, which would, and I'd have to check my notes here, but which approach about 1,500 square feet, those would be 3-bedroom and a den, which is clearly earmarked towards a full family. But at the other end of the scale, if I may go back to that smaller unit, that is envisioned to be clearly less expensive and begins to address some of the housing needs of the community as a whole.
Thank you very much. I like the architectural rendering. It looks appealing to me. It's sort of what we're encouraging on Yonge Street. That's what we sort of like to see. And I think that if you are a retailer or you have some of the industries, you'll be glad to see entry-level housing available for workers and potential shoppers. So you do have entry, the right-in and right entry level. I mean, entry to into the and parking are the two biggest concerns that grabbed my attention right off the bat.
Thank you.
Councillor Gardner, Councillor Ragas.
Thank you. Just following on that, 750 square feet is what you consider, what you think will be the smallest apartment size?
Yes, about 60, through you, Mr. Mayor, 60 square meters, which translates into about 700 to 750 square feet.
And that will be a 1-bedroom?
That would be a 1-bedroom, yes.
Thank you. You did mention trying to connect to the Stronach complex that it would be nice for your residents to connect. Are you thinking about a path?
Pardon me?
That's, I believe, a protected area. Are you thinking about a path through there?
There's a 15-meter protection zone that was tied to the original use when it was envisioned to be commercial. And as part of that environmental or the tree vegetation study that's underway right now, what we'd look to do is identify the opportunity for a pedestrian scaled path from our site to the recreational facility. It would just be a real shame to have it next door and not be able to get there.
I agree. Thank you. I also have concerns about the parking. And I know the 1.25 standard is used in certain places, but in this area with no parking to go, no place to go except to Leslie Street, to park on Leslie, I don't think they can, or to our SARC parking, which is already well used, if not overused. So I do have concern about the parking that's going to be provided.
Councilor Marcus.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the proponent. I guess it's back to the parking also. I'm just curious, we've had some math done for us, so we're looking at 375 spots, but are you also looking for an amendment to remove the minimum of 20% that's required for visitor parking? So if, what I'm saying is you're looking for the change from 1.5 to 1.25.
Correct.
But the RA3 also states that with a minimum of 20% of the required spaces be provided for visitor parking. Are you also looking for that to be removed?
No, we are not.
So then, in essence, we're looking at 74 visitor parking spots, because that would be 20% of 375.
Again, that would be part of the more detailed traffic study, but the 1.5 and 20% of that is the minimum visitor parking requirement. So, the architect.
Good evening. My name is John Romanov. I'm the architect. We're basing the suggestion of the parking on 1.25 down from the 1.5 by maintaining the 0.2 as being the visitor parking. So we look at these projects that we've done across the GTA. Typically, residents purchase their parking with the suite. We've done projects where we have one parking spot per suite, and sometimes those parking spots do not get purchased. So quite often you end up with a large parking area that is never full. Typically these units are pre-sold. So in the pre-selling of the units, there's an option for the developer to increase the number of parking depending on load or requirement from purchasers. And so what we're suggesting is that to put an artificial cap at 1.5, which may never be in fact physically used on the site, we would still provide the requirement for the visitors, but we're suggesting that in this process, we would see how many residents actually require parking. If they all require parking or they want to have 2 parking spaces, that could be increased through the sales of the units.
And that's great. So I guess my question is so there would be at least a minimum of 74 spots?
Correct.
Thank you. And then I guess I have one other question to the proponent. Was there any thought ever given to, because I do see the concerns with the people doing the U-turn, because people do U-turns all the time to go to the Tim Hortons, and we see it all the time. So was any thought ever given to flipping the whole plan so that way the exit would be up on the north end? And I know that there is some concerns with being next door to the
yeah, that would have some issues. I could have the traffic consultant discuss that, but our understanding is the proximity of that access then from our project next to the project to the north would be even more of an issue than having the location where it is proposed at the moment. We also had some concerns with the proximity to the existing gas station. So the way the buildings are sited now, you have a green buffer that's basically backing onto that gas station rather than residential units overlooking a gas station.
Okay, and just as a follow-up, so but wouldn't it be the same if you flipped it? You would still have that green buffer between the 2 entrances?
Well, if we flip the project over, you'd have residential units up against the south property line overlooking the gas station.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the proponent, I recall seeing the York Region traffic plan for our area, and there's a plan to widen Leslie over the next year or two. And I recall there was a sidewalk on one side or the other, and I suspect it might be on the west side because east side there are no residential areas. So my question is, if there are plans for sidewalks, is there setbacks that you guys set aside for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the widening is proposed for the regional road. I believe it to be 3 meters.